We want to tell you, take that first step. Maybe for you, that first step is just writing your idea down. Maybe it's just you need to have the courage to tell your spouse the idea that's brewing in your head. Maybe you need to do some business research or work on a business plan.
Yeah.
Whatever it is.
Welcome to today's episode of You've Gotta Hear This, a lifestyle podcast with conversations crafted to help you begin to live a life that you love. We want to see you defy limitations, endure through struggles, learn from some of our trial and error, and really begin to live that life that you've been dreaming about. I am your co-host, Tyler Tullis, and honored as always to sit right here alongside the one, the only, and the beautiful Crystal.
We're so glad if this is your first time joining in on our podcast. Welcome to our table. We're excited to have another conversation with you. We have tried to take our 20 years of marriage, our 20 years of experience, raising 4 kids, moving across the country, starting a church. We're entrepreneurs. Someone called us solopreneurs this week.
Yeah,
We've
was interesting.
started
That's a good
childcare
one.
centers. We're in real estate. We own a couple Airbnb properties, and we're trying to bring all of that experience right to your listening ears so we can help you take our 20 years and whittle it down to 20 months. We love to say it like this, that we want to help you go from eating beans like we've had to do to flying business class so that you can truly defy those limitations and build and live a life that you love. In each episode, we try to share practical help, strategy, wisdom, all the stuff that you've got to hear so like us, you can build and live a life that you love.
That's right. And today's episode is all about courageous beginnings. We want to walk away from this conversation today. We want you to walk away from this conversation feeling motivated, challenged, and encouraged, and ready to take that step and start that dream or that idea that you've had brewing in your mind, maybe for an hour, maybe for a day, maybe for a decade. We really want to help you take that first big step into the dark, murky waters of the unknown, of starting something new. It's all about courageous beginnings, finding the courage to get something going, to get something off the ground. And I think it's safe to summarize it this way. The first step is always the scariest step, but it is doable. You can do it. We've done it. And we want to encourage you in that today. Our goal today is to help set a metaphorical fire in your bones to get you up and get you going and ready to take that first scary step, to have the courage to begin something new. So today you've got to hear this. Your idea is worth pursuing.
Yes.
The idea that's in you, the dream that's in you, it is worth pursuing. And in order to see that idea come to pass, it's going to require courage blended with action. And we want to help you see what that intersection looks like today.
Yeah, and so since our audience is just getting to know us, we want to give you a little bit of a backstory about who we are, why we are so passionate about you hearing that your idea is worth pursuing. We were in our 20s when we were living where Tyler is originally from in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. If you cannot tell from our accents, we are completely Southern. I grew up in West Texas. Tyler's a good old South Baton Rouge boy, South Louisiana boy from the Bayou.
Good old. That's the important adjective there. Good old. Good old boy.
We grew up in the South. Got married really young. We were on staff at a church, having the time of our life. Started having kids when we were 24. Had everything our heart could desire. All of our friends, all of our family, Tiger Stadium. Come on, what else was there to live for in our young 20s? And then we went on vacation to Boston in 2007. We went just as tourists, right?
Stinking David Ortiz ruined it all.
Big Papi hit
Big Papi.
a grand slam right to our section.
Help a brother out, Big Papi.
It was so fun.
My
we
man.
walked around the Boston Commons, down by the wharf, just fell in love with the city. My sister lived in New York at the time, and we would go visit her with our new baby, and I would think, man, how do you raise kids here in the city? I don't think I could do this. But then when we came to Boston and saw the green spaces and people weren't like cussing you out for having a stroller, going into a store.
It's a big improvement,
and
actually.
we were like, hey, we could live here. Like, we could do this.
Yeah.
And I think there was something cool about it. We were naive. There's always, when you're from the South, correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, no, it feels like when you come to a place like Boston, it honestly feels like you're walking it through a history book, like in class.
Well, that's true.
Like living through mythology. It might as well have been like Poseidon's Adventure or something, walking through the north end of Boston. That's what it felt like.
The point I was going to make was when you're from the South.
Oh, we weren't on the same page with that one? Oh, that works out too.
Poseidon. Okay. You went to Poseidon.
Isn't he a mythology person?
Yes. Okay, stay on track.
Okay,
so when you're from the South and you go to, like, when you think about the East Coast, you think about big cities and you've not traveled much. Everything in your mind is like what you see on the movies, like every city
like
on the
Home
East
Alone.
Coast.
Home Alone
everything
2.
is Home Alone 2.
Yeah, everything is Home Alone 2. That's
and so
right.
when we came to Boston, we were like, oh, this is so different than New York City.
Yeah.
And I remember walking around the city then thinking, man, I'd really like to live here. This would be incredible.
Well, and Poseidon. We were thinking about Poseidon.
Okay,
So,
all
I mean,
right.
it was a combination of the two.
Greek mythology. And so we walked around the city, fell in love with it. Big Poppy hits the Grand Slam. And our church back then was really big into church planning. They were starting multiple campuses all around kind of the whole globe. It was kind of a big movement back in the early 2000s. I mean, church planning is still a big thing, but back then it was really more people were doing multi-site and multi-campus. And so I remember telling Tyler as we were down kind of in the Boston Common, feeling so cool, pushing our baby in a stroller. I was like, if our church ever started a campus here, I would like sign up tomorrow to be on this, like to be on the team. Like I would move here. I think we were 24 at that time. And you're just kind of wanting an adventure, you're building your life. And he was like, yeah, we would love that. So anyways, we go back to Baton Rouge, the high of a vacation, you go back to real life and we're not really thinking about it. And then 2 years later, I remember you and I started there was like this dissatisfaction.
Well, there was no kind of, it was, it was a strange sort of feeling.
There was this strange feeling like, I don't know that we're supposed to be doing what we're doing anymore. I feel a little out of place. Like this church that I was like so in love with, this like this path for our life that we were pursuing. And granted, anyone listening to this that's over 40, you're like, yeah, you were 26. It's a normal progression of life, right? Like what you start out doing when you're 20 is definitely not probably what you're going to be doing at 30. There's major life changes that happen. And so we were 26 and, really, I think starting to think about like, what is the path for our life? Where is it, what we're doing, what we're going? And so I remember you and I thinking back then, well, what if we started a church? And there was this idea, if you're like in the church world or you're religious at all, people might call it a calling, right? Where you feel like God is talking to you about something. There's like a kind of an idea brewing in your heart about something, an idea brewing in your mind. And, maybe in future episodes, we can talk more about how do you know if it actually is a calling. But there were a lot of things for us that we felt like God wouldn't leave us alone about.
Right.
And one of those things was planting a church.
Right. Well, that's really the first big chunk of this idea of having the courage to step into something new is that you really have to be willing to embrace the unknown. And not just like we call it the church side hug, you know what I'm saying? Like where you kind of embrace it like this, but like you got to full on like bear hug embrace the unknown. Because what you were just describing, that part of our story, it was like we were standing at the beginning of this path and this like heavy dense fog had just come and settled in. And as we looked out into the future, we knew that where we were wasn't the right place anymore, wasn't the right season anymore, but we still couldn't see beyond like right where we were standing. But we knew that there was something else out there. And so it's like this weird blend of excitement and maybe not fear, but just uncertainty, right?
And so we want to unpack that in today's episode. Like, how do you really get the confidence to believe that your idea is worth pursuing, no matter how unknown it is, no matter how scary it feels? Because I'm going to tell you, when you and I started having those conversations interpersonally, there was like this whole realization of like, whoa, like like, okay, what if we actually do this? Now, at the time, we weren't thinking about moving to Boston. It was just this idea of what if we moved
Something
from where
else.
we are
Yeah.
and
What if
did
there was
something else.
Right.
We had been, on staff at that church for 6 years, and that was like our whole world. And so the idea of actually just doing something different than we were doing was and there was a whole process of how we got to Boston that we'll talk about in later episodes. But I think just that idea, it can be scary. So we're going to unpack that in today's episode. But before we dive in, do us a favor. If you find anything in this podcast that speaks to you, do us a favor and share it, subscribe to it, rate it, tell your friends about it. There may be things in here that you can share. And when you do subscribe and rate this podcast, it helps other people find this resource that you may be enjoying as well. So let's really dive in now to this idea that you brought up about embracing the unknown. Yeah. Because if you're going to pursue your idea, which is worth pursuing, listen, that's what you've got to hear today. It doesn't matter who's for your idea, what people are saying behind your back or to your face. It doesn't even matter the doubt you might have. If you've got an idea, and it may not be the right idea, but whatever idea that you've got stirring, it's at least worth pursuing to find out if it's a good idea or a bad idea. So what we want to do today is really talk about what are the things that you've got to do, what are the steps that you've got to take, what are the principles that you've got to adopt so that you can defy those limitations and live this life that you're thinking about.
So, Crystal, do this. Let's do this. Let's take the audience back to you and I in our living room on Highland Club Avenue, right? Wow.
Highland Club Avenue. I have not thought about that address in a good decade.
What was it? Anyway, I could remember the numbers, but that's irrelevant. Okay, so Highland Club Avenue, and then later on Goodwood Boulevard. In those moments of our life, let's bring people back to that moment. What were some of the questions we were asking? Do you remember working through the excitement and the uncertainty and how we processed through that?
Well, first I will say we probably externally processed with too many people at the beginning.
Ooh.
I think that's something you don't really know you're doing until it's too late. I remember processing with family, with friends. You think they're safe places, but when you're young, so I think to any young listeners, just know that principle. Your idea is worth pursuing, but it's probably not worth talking about right now. There's a lot of internal dialogue that you've got to go through, that process that you've got to go through before you talk about it. So we probably talked about it too much just in excitement because I remember being excited. It was terrifying and it was scary that we might be thinking about this, but I remember being excited because it was something in our heart to do. So I remember thinking what's our boss? That was probably first and foremost. What's our pastor who was our boss, right? What's he gonna say? And I remember that it took you a good year to garner up the courage to even.
It wasn't a year.
It was.
Stop lying. People are watching. Come on, Pastor Crystal. Don't lie to the people.
It was a year.
Okay, fine. It took a while. All right. But I mean, I think that's maybe that was a little bit being young, but also that's the reality of this fog. It's you can't see really what the next step is. You can't see what does this conversation look like with this boss or this person or this parent or this sister or this family member.
We told our family that we were going to move eventually first there was we're going to plant a church. We're going to start a church. For those of you not in the church world, planting a church just means starting a church.
Yeah.
Hey, we're going to start a church. And then the question was where? And we're well, we don't really know. As we've kind of processed and prayed about it, we're
Baton Rouge.
We were we're feeling like God's telling us we're supposed to be anywhere but the South.
Anywhere.
That was kind of the first thought, right? And I remember your mom, blessed Nona, she was well, you could go to Alabama. That's close.
It's closer than Boston,
right?
And it's not wrong, geographically speaking.
And I was we could go to China.
Geographically speaking, that's true. But calling, right? When it comes up to the calling, those two concepts couldn't have been any further apart. And I think that's a human reaction for a family member,
that's
right? But at the same time, you when you're embracing this unknown, you have to be so selective is the right word, and who shares this vision, who shares this excitement with you, because what what can be like well-intentioned questions and like thoughts and oh my goshes can really be deflating and discouraging.
And people will try to sideline or carry sideways your vision and your idea of what you're feeling like is best. And I think, that's truly one of the passions and heartbeats of this podcast is you only get to live one life.
Hello.
Like you are responsible for the life that you live. And while you can value other people's opinions about your life, take their counsel, get their feedback, that's all wise, right? At the end of the day, this is your life. And so you have to take responsibility and live the life you want to live, not the life other people think you should live or that they expect you to live.
Right.
Like that's really important. And you're going to disappoint people. Like, first of all, people don't like change. So if you say, I'm moving to take this job, or I'm going to start this business, or we're going to have another kid, I mean, somebody is going to have something to say about everything.
It's true.
And so that's the first part about embracing the unknown, is just getting really comfortable about what other people are going to say to you, learning to be gracious on how to respond.
And the picture is, I didn't mean to cut you
me
off, but like, what other people say, it just piles up, right? And so someone who's taking this step of courage into the unknown has got to be able to dig back down through to the bedrock word, the bedrock
of that idea,
and say, no, it doesn't matter what has piled up on top since the idea was formed. I'm coming back to this, and I'm taking a step out on this idea, on this word, on this dream, and not on all the other layers of opinions and feelings and care even that other people pile on top of it.
One of the scariest parts of that process, as we were really vetting this idea, there's an older mentor couple of us, Mr. Eric and Miss Susan Williams.
Oh, we got to get them on this
And
podcast.
That would be fun.
They would love that.
Mr. Eric could tell his list of jokes. But they asked us, at the same time we were thinking about moving to Boston, she's a VP executive, or was in her career with Dow Chemical, and they were looking to transfer her to Marlboro, Mass. And so it was kind of at the same time, so we were all excited about it. So she asked us, it was probably one of the best things, you remember that she did, she said, I want you to put together a business plan for your church idea, and I want you to present it to me about why I should move my family, because she had an opportunity to move to Indiana or to move to Marlboro, Mass, which at the end of the day, she didn't like our business plan and moved to Indiana where her family was. But she had us put together this business plan and then present it to her, like, why should we pick Massachusetts over Indiana for this job transfer? And I think that was like so scary, but it helped us put like pen to paper, because so much about processing and stepping into the unknown isn't simply thinking or processing your fears. And so many times we will talk ourselves out of an idea that's worth pursuing simply because we tell ourselves all of the bad things that could happen, and we never take time to vet the good things that could come from it, the pros about it, right? And then all of that negativity steps. And I think what Miss Susan did for us and Mr. Eric is they had us say, here's the plan, here's the idea that's pursuing, and it had us for the first time put it in front of people that were 2 decades older than us, that were professionals, and they were able to give us feedback about it from like a neutral third-party stance. And I can't really thank them enough about that, because at the end of the day, what they solidified in us, and it's what you've got to hear today, is that Tyler and Crystal, your idea is worth pursuing, right? And to see this idea come to pass, it's going to take a lot of courage, and it's going to take some action on your part.
And I think that's what Eric and Susan did for us, and hopefully you can find this in your story, or maybe set up a coaching call with us and we can be this in your story, is discerning the difference between challengers and critics. And I think that's what Eric and Susan were. They challenged our idea, but they were not critical of our idea, right? And you got to discern the difference between the two, because someone who helps you test the idea is a lot different than someone who just tears the idea down, right? And you need the challenge, because you got to really make sure. And in fact, a challenger to your idea could be the equivalent of someone standing behind you and pushing you into that first step of really testing your theory, testing your concept, running it by somebody who's been there, done that.
And I think it's important for all of us listening, if anybody comes to us with an idea, right? Someone in our families, maybe you're a boss of somebody, or, it's one of your employees, or it's one of your friends even. I think we need to be people that are quick to listen and slow to speak,
Amen.
right? Because our words really carry weight. And we're finding this more now as we're, in our 40s, and we've got younger people on our team, and they're where we were, right?
So.
They're young 20s, and they've been committed on our team, and now they're thinking about doing something else. And I think when they come to us with ideas, we've learned from those experiences when people were so quick to tear our idea down or to keep us in the same constant thing that we've already been doing and not let us evolve, it can be so hurtful. So that's just kind of here nor there. But all right, so we've talked about embracing the unknown. Let's talk about what the anatomy of courage actually is, because I think there's this false kind of idea about what courage is, right? Is courage just like going forward no matter what? Or is, what is courage? So talk to us, Tyler, about, according to our notes, you're supposed to be talking about what courage is. So at this exact moment, I'm going to transition it to you.
Well, it brings me back to the Disney cartoon classic Hercules. Really kind of it does, right? Because courage.
Are you going to sing for us now?
Well, I don't think it's that. It's not that kind of podcast. You know what I'm saying? But no. That's what courage really is knowing that there's something in you that's bigger than you, but then having the faith and the patience to really walk into that thing, right? Like whatever that is. I don't know if that made any sense at all, and I don't even know if that had anything to do with Hercules. That's just where my brain went right out of the gate. But courage, it shows up in various forms. Courage will show up at various times. Sometimes courage can show up, and it's not even showing up through you, it's just showing up for you, where someone can come in at the right moment and be like, get in there and do it, boy, like just kind of getting after it. Like Crystal said, it doesn't have to be big heroic moments like at the end of the movie where the music really comes, like the denouement, if you will, right? Like it doesn't have to be those kind of moments. Courage, honestly, is just made up of the small little moments along the way.
Actions that you're taking.
Yeah, a little here, a little there, a little dash of this and a little dose of that, and like, hey, let's just.
And I think courage is not void of fear. Courage is actually like this really, everybody thinks courage is just like having bravery, but courage is a very complex action, right? It is made up of many emotions. There's going to be a lot of fear included in courage, a lot of confusion. It's that process to handle the conflict, to deal with that internal insecurity and being vulnerable to defend your ideas. And there's going to be a whole lot of internal and external dialogue that's a part of courage. And I just think that it's not as easy. It's not those big heroic moments. It's having the presence to lean into each of those emotions and to feel those emotions.
Yeah, if courage was a food, it would be a gumbo.
Okay.
That's profound, right?
Okay.
Bunch of different ingredients, a lot of stuff you don't think goes together.
He makes a good gumbo.
But when you put it in there, you get a good roux. Nothing quite like it.
That's
change
right.
the world. Courage will change the world.
And so if you're listening to
just
this
like a good gumbo. Sorry,
no, Gumbo will
I'm
change
getting
your
hungry.
world.
I'm getting myself hungry now.
So listen, if you're listening to this podcast, let me just assure you right now that if you're thinking of stepping out this year, doing something new, starting something new, making a change, moving to a new place, changing churches, adding a child, becoming first-time parents, taking that promotion, whatever that is, and you're feeling confused, you're feeling afraid, you're hitting conflict.
Vulnerable, insecure, all those things.
Any of that.
Yeah.
I'm just here to tell you, you're probably on the verge of the right idea. And let me say it again, you've got to hear this. Your idea is worth pursuing. It's just going to take a little bit of courage and a lot of small actions to get there.
That's good, Crystal. That's great. So then tell us, how do you, if the idea is worth pursuing, how do you pursue it? How do you navigate through the courage to pursue the idea?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of tender moments in these transitions. You're dealing with people's lives here, right? That's why we started this episode. We want people to gain wisdom, practical insight on actually living and building a life that you love. And that doesn't come without its struggle, without its conflict. It's a human experience. And so you've got to have wisdom. You've got to have discernment. For us, faith, biblical wisdom, doing things God's way. It's really important because, I think that a lot of feelings, a lot of relationships get lost if we don't. And at the end of the day, the Bible says that there's a path that seems right to you, but it may be the wrong thing. So here it's saying your idea is worth pursuing, but you've got to know when, hey, I'm heading in the wrong direction. I've pursued the idea. I've thought about it. I've dialogued about it. I've hit conflict about it. But at the end of the day, I'm going to listen to my counsel. And this is a bad idea for me. Like, you don't want to be the kind of person that heads off into the unknown, that's full of danger, and everybody's going caution, 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 and you don't count the costs of what this project's going to cost you: money, time, energy, relationship, for your kids, and just head out anyways. The Bible makes that pretty clear. You're being a fool at that point. So we're not saying that you don't weigh all of that in, but I think as you're weighing, another temptation on the other side of the coin is you get lost and you get stunted in what we call analysis paralysis. This is where a lot of people stop in their process of should I or shouldn't I? It would be so easy if God would just be like, Crystal, go here. But so often that doesn't happen. And so in this stage of where we're analyzing everything, we can get stuck in this paralysis. And we had this experience. So let's tell them the story. Like in our notes, we made note of a story where we really kind of felt this moment of it's now or never. We've got to make our choice.
Well, yeah. A part of our process was dialoguing with people that would be a big part of this next step, or not even this next step, the first step. That first step of courage that we're talking about today. And it wasn't just conversations that we wanted to happen. They were conversations that we needed to happen. And the response that we got was not overwhelmingly supportive.
Well, no. And it was 2010. The Big Short had just happened. The housing market. Yeah,
context is important.
So we're telling everybody, hey, we want to move to one of the least churched, most expensive zip codes in America, and we want to start a church. Here we are, 27, naive, young, and of course people ahead of us who have done it are like, that's a bad idea. Yeah. It's not the time to be planting and starting anything right now. Yeah,
and so again, maybe the motives were innocent, but the words were cutting.
It's true.
Because the way that it was communicated was, you're not ready, you need to take a job, and literally the words were said, put your dream on a shelf. To someone who's maybe on the verge of taking that first step, you maybe have heard those things yourself. You can imagine, or exactly what that feels like, and especially from a trusted voice, someone you anticipated being excited for you, someone you anticipated being supportive of you, to basically say, no, don't do it.
Yeah,
that's a bad idea. Just do the same old.
Take
right?
a job.
Take a job. You got to be. It's hard.
It was hard. There's no doubt about it. Those moments were hard. So we take this job interview that our pastor, our boss, told us that we should take instead of starting a church. And so we go on this job interview, and it's in Massachusetts. And our thought was, hey, it'll get us to Mass. Yeah. We'll eventually start a church there. In future episodes, we'll talk about the criticalness of timing, how timing is so important. There's a time for everything under the sun. True. And so that's why we're saying you've got to take that first step. But we go on this interview. It's a 7-day interview. We met so many lovely people. It was great. And the job was for an associate pastor position. There was not a job for me. I was going to have to get a job elsewhere. But in this interview, if you remember, I found out I was pregnant. Like, something didn't feel right. I told Tyler, I'm like, you need to stop at that CVS right there.
It's so funny. We live right by that CVS.
Yeah, now we do. We stopped at that CVS in Framingham and grabbed a pregnancy test. And I actually took it in the CVS. Yeah. And I found out I was pregnant. Well, listen, our context at that time was we had 2 little boys. We now have no job. Nobody at this time is like, here, we'll give you money to start a church. And we have no health insurance, right? Because were in this moment. I mean, Tyler tried to get a job at Enterprise during this time.
The rental car company.
They pick everybody up.
Except Tyler.
They did not pick him up. I mean, this was the state of our life.
They got no ride for your boy. I'm sitting on the side of the road. Like, Uber, it doesn't exist yet. There's nothing.
College degrees didn't matter because all we had done, for 7 years from 20 to 27 was work at a church. So it's not really the time to be entering into the corporate world. And so we go and I find I'm pregnant and I'm like, I'm like, you have got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm pregnant with our third child. We have no way to pay this. And so anyways, we finished the job interview. And at the end of the job interview, the pastor, he was so gracious. He said, hey, I feel like you're really wrestling with something. You need to go home. You need to really think about it. Why don't you take 7 days, call me at this end of 7 days and tell me kind of what your decision.
Yeah.
And that 7 days.
God. It was like WWE from the top rope wrestling match. Like it was, we call it brutal. Like it was beautiful because it was a part of the process. But dude, it was brutal. It was like Andre the Giant landing on the backside of your head over and over again. It was brutal.
One day, okay, we're going to take the job. It's a good income. It'll get us to Massachusetts. Yep. And then the next day we'd wake up with just this sinking, nauseous feeling like we are making the biggest mistake of our life. Mm-hmm. You've probably felt that before, right? Where you're like, it's just this roller coaster of emotion. I'm going to quit my job today and I'm going to tell my boss. And then you freak out and you change your mind. And because that fear of that unknown, it's so hard. So anyways, we get to the end of the 7 days and the night before we've got to make our decision. You had a call, I think, scheduled at 8:00 that next morning.
The next morning, yep.
And 3:00 in the morning, the night before, we're tossing and turning. Morning of,
yeah.
That's right. I am cramping and we go to the emergency room and we're sitting in the emergency room. We're so embarrassed because we had no health insurance. And so we had to apply for state aid that night.
It was new to us, yeah.
And we were like, what are we doing? Mm-hmm. Like, this idea of trying to start a church has cost us everything to the point where we can't even pay for our hospital stay tonight. Mm-hmm. And I remember looking at the ultrasound and we're not seeing a heartbeat. And I just in this moment of kind of weakness, I looked at Tyler and I said, just take the job. I said, it's not what we want to do, but just take the job. It'll get us a salary. We've got these 2 little boys. Nobody's behind us. Just take the job. Yeah. And I remember you sitting there. And why are you such a saint that you just carry a Bible around with you all the time?
I'm sitting here processing that right now. Like, of all the things in God's green earth that I could have brought with me to this moment in our story.
But you had this little red Bible that you had bought me for our first wedding anniversary.
I don't know why I brought it, but I guess it was important.
And you were flipping through it. And when I said that to you, babe, just take a job. Do you remember what you said to me?
Yeah. I said, I don't think that we can take this job. I said, I can't read any more of these stories of people of faith. I said, we've got to live one. And if we don't do it now,
we never will.
And I remember, I don't remember exactly like saying it in that moment. And it might feel more dramatic now than it was in the moment, but I'll never forget the look on your face. Laying there with having just experienced this traumatic sort of moment, and just the look on the countenance really on your face just changing from stressed and oh my gosh and all of the things happening at once to it was like okay,
I remember seeing tenacity in your eyes for the first time. Taking the listener back just a few days prior, I remember walking into the living room and you were sitting, we had this recliner or kind of sitting chair. You were sitting there. The TV was off. The room was quiet. And you literally were just staring into space like a zombie. Mm. And I remember this like sense of dread on your face. And it sounds so dramatic now. And listen, this is why we can tell you your idea is worth pursuing, because all of that is rubbish now. Like 14, 15 years later, the decision to move across the country and pursue our dream is the best decision we have ever made. We have made more money, have made more relationships. We are so rich in every area of life because of that decision. Did it cost us? 1,000%. Was our name run through the mud? 1,000%. Did we go against status quo? Have we lost family and friends? Do we get to go home for Christmas every year? No, we don't. And that's the reality of why people never step into the unknown, because you don't know how good it will be on the other side if you'll just take the step.
That's right.
And I'm so proud of you that day. And that was that tenacity that I saw in your eyes. I was like, I can follow into the unknown with you. I can take that step.
Thanks, babe.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. And we did.
And we did. And so you told the guy that was so gracious to offer us a job, you told him, I just don't feel like I can do this.
Yep.
And then, of course, it was scary to tell our boss who had told you you're not ready that we were going to do it anyways. But we did that, and we've never looked back. And I will tell you that decision, and I'll just tell you now so you don't have to wait till future episodes. It was a few years later. We were living in Boston, and I really had this sense that baby that I miscarried was a sign from God, that if we were to take that job, we would be miscarrying the dream that was inside of us. Yep. I really felt like there was this, like, God is telling you, like, now is the moment. This is, that's in you. There is a time assigned for everything under heaven. And yeah, we would have taken that job and life would have been good and God would have worked everything out for our good. But he was ready to birth this community and this life that is now StoryHeights Church and StoryHeights Montessori's and our real estate ventures. He was moving people in time and space together, and it was contingent upon whether or not we took that job.
That's right.
And so I hope that encourages you. I know that's kind of deep, and that's what we want to do. We want to really just go from here and wherever you are as we kind of close this up, we want to tell you, take that first step. Maybe for you, that first step is just writing your idea down. Maybe it's just you need to have the courage to tell your spouse the idea that's brewing in your head. Maybe you need to do some business research or work on a business plan.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, just take that first step today, because I'm telling you, your idea is worth pursuing.
That's good, man. That's good. Yeah, feel the fear, step in courage, and don't put yourself in a position where you will regret what you don't know you're not living yet.
That's right.
Right? And that's what it all comes down to.
That's good. All right, so Tyler, as we wrap up today, I do have one question for you, and I think you've got one for me. But before we get there, let me tell everyone, we invite you to share your own stories of courageous beginnings with us. Your journey could be the inspiration that someone else needs to hear. So you can share your story with us and grab even more resources on this topic by heading to you'vegottahearthis.com, where you can join our mailing list, grab bonus content on each episode, and book your strategy coaching call with us so that you can start building and living a life that you love. Tyler, last question to you as we wrap up this episode, which has been so great.
So great.
Well, I think it's been great. Whether whether the listeners think that or not is up to them.
TBD.
Maybe you'll rate it for us. But looking back, is there a piece of advice or encouragement that you wish you could have given yourself at the beginning of our courageous beginning?
Yeah, it would have been the advice that we gave the listener today, that my idea was worth pursuing, and that I was worth it to be the person to pursue it. I think that was
that's good right there.
My biggest insecurity was, it's a great idea, it's a noble idea, but Tyler's not the person to do it. No, Tyler was.
Like having self-confidence.
And it took me a little while to get there. That's what I would say. Your idea is worth it, and so are you as the person to pursue it.
That's awesome.
Yeah. How do you think, Crystal, embracing the unknown has changed you, both personally and in the way that we work together?
I think that after all of these years, I trust you more because I saw you take a step of faith. So just like I respect you because you were willing to kind of pioneer and go out into the future. And I also think that I'm willing to take more steps into the unknown. Like that's in our history, but there are more steps that are in front of us.
In the future.
And I think I'm willing to take that now because I gained confidence. Like, yeah, it may go bad, but it may go good. So I think it's worth taking that step. Like this idea is worth pursuing.
That's good. That's really good.
All right, well, we hope that you've enjoyed this today. We hope it's been helpful. In our next episode, we're tackling one of the biggest questions that we get all the time, and that is, how do you work with your spouse? How do you work with your spouse? It'll be all about marriage and how to work with your spouse.
That's
Working
right.
with your spouse.
I'll just say you're welcome for that, first of all. But before we sign off, let's recap today's episode. Today, you've got to hear that your idea is worth pursuing, and you are worthy to pursue it. And to see that idea come to pass, it's going to take courage and a lot of little action steps between here and there to see you live the life that you love and live the life that you're dreaming about today. You got to be willing to step into the unknown. You got to understand that courage is not void of fear. It's moving forward anyway. And you can't get stuck in analysis paralysis and turn all that fear and confusion into fuel towards taking another step towards your idea. Taking that first step, no matter how small, it's the most important step you'll ever take. And you can take it today.
That's right. So thanks again for joining us, Tyler and Crystal Tullis, in this episode of You've Got to Hear This. We look forward to welcoming you to our table next time for more conversation. Until then, hear us as we declare over your life, you will defy every limitation and live and build a life that you love.